Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning into the What the Fricative podcast, where we talk all things speech pathology. My name is Sam, and we have a lovely guest today, Natalie Iverson. She is here to talk about challenges that she faced during grad school and how to advocate for yourself when these challenges come up. So we're going to have a great conversation today talking about motherhood in graduate school and all fun things. And I always like to start the podcast by asking our guests, tell us about yourself and who you are outside of the world of speech pathology.
Let's see. So I am a wife and a mother to a very active 18-month-old boy, as well as a Goldendoodle who somehow is less crazy than my 1-year-old. I like all things artsy and music and then some board games.
That's awesome. You have a beautiful son. I was looking at your page and I was like, wow, this is the most perfect little baby ever.
Oh, thank you.
Sure. You are currently in your clinical fellowship, so your application process wasn't that long ago. Can you tell us a little bit about how your application process was? For me, I know it was not a great journey. I applied to so many schools and only got into one. So I'm curious to know if you had a similar kind of journey.
Sure. Yeah. For grad school. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I applied to about 5 different schools. Most of them were within a state or two from family. So I applied to schools in Oregon, Colorado, Utah, and I got rejected from one, waitlisted for 3, and then accepted to one. And the one that I got accepted to, I had only applied on a whim because I saw that one of the professors knew how to do ultrasound technology to look at the tongue. And I was like, well, that sounds cool. I'll just apply. Let's see what happens. And so that's the one I got in. I didn't ever hear back from any of the waitlist ones after I got waitlisted. And one happened to be Syracuse University out in upstate New York. And so I was like, well, looks like we're moving across the country. So that is essentially what led me to go where I ended up going for grad school.
Grad school is scary as it is, but moving across the country for graduate school is even scarier. I just moved, actually the opposite. I moved from New York to California and we did a cross country drive. Did you drive or were you able to fly?
Yeah, so driving, we drove out there, one, so that we could get both of our cars out there, but then 2, because it was in the middle of the pandemic. Because I
Oh,
started grad school in the fall of 2020.
oh my goodness. So, how did the pandemic impact like the start of your grad school plus a cross country move, plus being in somewhere new? You had all odds stacked against you.
Oh, it was actually insane. The weekend we were supposed to go house hunting is the same week that New York State issued their 14-day quarantine status. And so we were desperately trying to figure out if we could change our flights to get there just barely earlier, because if you got there 13 hours before our flight was supposed to land, we wouldn't have to stay there for 14 days before going out. And of course, that didn't work out. So our realtor went and looked at houses for us
Oh my,
instead. So we bought sight unseen across the country moving. And then when we got there, it's not like you could meet anybody, because who's going to want to come over to your house when you've just moved here? And so we were on our own for the most part. We had one nice person from our local congregation at church that came to at least help us move our mattress upstairs
oh my gosh,
at
yeah.
our house. But other than that, it was really lonely for that first little bit. Classes were either fully online or hybrid. So where they would split the class in half, and one of the 2 days you would go in person and there was maybe 5 other people with you. And then the other day you were online trying to learn the same material as the people that were in class.
Oh my gosh, that's so hard. That's why people always are like, oh, I want to do online school. I want to do online grad school. And I always tell people, I'm like, yeah, it sounds great, and I'm sure you will be great in it. However, it is so lonely, especially if you're going somewhere new, you're in a new place. It is so hard to meet people in grad school. I was fully in person and I had difficulty meeting people because some people knew others from undergrad, or they already made a group with each other. And I was just doing my own thing for like the first couple of months, just going to class, keep my head down and just making sure I get all my work done. But yeah, grad school can get lonely. And I try to talk about that a lot on my page because I want people that feel that to know that they're not alone and it's not them. That it happens to a lot of people. Graduate school, a lot of the time, to either have a super young cohort, really clicky and make friends with each other really quick. And then you have some older people. So yeah, grad school can get super lonely. How did you deal with going to school, being in a new place? Do you feel it impacted your relationship with your husband, or was he learning all the stuff with you?
He was such a good sport. I think my in-laws were devastated when they found out we were moving across the country. But he was always such a good support for me. We really had to lean into our relationship with each other because we had nobody else. We couldn't get together with people. We couldn't make new friends. So it was really just the two of us for those first few months, which was hard, but I don't think I could have stayed in grad school if I didn't have him.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I'm so happy you had that support. And that's another thing I touch upon too on my page is that people have a life outside of grad school. And I think that grad school faculties often forget that. You had a nice little surprise come. What was it, first semester?
Yeah, I found out we were planning on having a baby, but I figured, oh, if we start now, I'll get pregnant just in time to have this baby right as I finish grad school. And of course, things don't work that way.
Yeah.
And so I ended up getting pregnant right towards the end of my first semester of grad school and realized, okay, I'm going to be due during my right towards the end of my third semester. The track I was on at Syracuse was supposed to be 5 consecutive semesters, so fall, spring, summer, fall, spring, and I was due right at the end of that summer semester.
So after you found out that you were pregnant, what were your feelings?
Oh man, I was like, whoa, we're gonna have to figure this out. This is gonna be a whole new level of hard. I don't know how to be a mom and tackle grad school. I didn't even I was lucky and privileged that I didn't have to work a job. My husband's job was enough for us. But as I started grad school, I didn't even choose to work because I was like, this is too much. I can't work and balance being a grad student. So how am I going to be a mom? So I really had to start trying to figure out how to manage my time ahead of time so that my anxiety could be in check when this baby came.
Yeah. And I'm sure your family was super supportive during that time, and it's okay. I have a baby coming. I'm in graduate school. Who do you turn to at this point? You're like, oh, okay, the faculty. Maybe they'll be supportive. Some of them may be moms of their own. They know the feeling. So what happened when you had to tell your grad school, hey, this is what's happening?
So a lot of them were supportive, especially the ones that were moms
Good.
and dads. They understood, oh, this is going to be hard. Let me know what you need from me. The hardest part was knowing that my due date was basically about 2 weeks before summer semester was supposed to be over, which means how am I going to finish the semester at least? And so I started talking to professors and they're like, oh, just let me know what you need. But that was supposed to be the first semester of fully in person. And so Syracuse was really pushing for, we're trying not to do any online. If you're out of state, please find a way to move in state now.
Oh, wow.
Because we want to be in person. And so I wasn't the only one that affected. But when they were saying, we really want you to be in person, I talked to my advisor and he said, you'll probably have to take the courses as incomplete and then just finish them the next time they're offered. I'm just, hey, so I'm going to be finishing these classes after I have a baby while I'm in my extern. I don't like the thought of that. So I decided to take it up with the dean of my program. And so I set up a meeting with her And it did not go the way I thought it was going to go. It didn't necessarily feel like she even read my emails knowing my situation ahead of time, because any type of solution I offered was met with resistance. Like, I asked if maybe halfway through the semester I could go online just in case the baby's early, so that I can complete as much as possible with all these unforeseen circumstances. And essentially she told me that it would be a inconvenience to the professors, which at that point I just started to cry. I was like, I'm offering everything I can. I'm trying to make solutions. I'm trying to work with my mental health here in mind, and nothing was going the way I thought it would go. And so ultimately I just ended up having to go with that first route, that I was going to have to take him as incomplete as soon as my son got here. Which that's not what I wanted to do, but it was literally the only option I had. And so he was born, like a week and a half before finals.
Oh my God.
I actually went into labor in the middle of giving an online presentation.
Of course. You're like, can anything else happen?
No. So luckily that was my one online class, so I wasn't in person trying to hide contractions. So I would turn off my camera, and then when it was my turn to present, it's okay, let's get through this really quick. Good breathing.
That's so funny. It's hard. Whenever I talk about graduate schools, I always like to say, we're not bashing graduate schools. We're not bashing the faculty in graduate school. And it's hard to be a graduate school. They have so many things that they have to focus on: numbers, statistics, money, all of that stuff. But I do like to point out that grad students are just as human as grad school faculty are. Things happen. You didn't say, okay, I want my son to be born while I'm presenting, or I want my son to be born weeks before a semester is supposed to end. That's just how things happen. And I just think as SLPs, as people in this profession, that is a skill that we have to have, is to be flexible. And you came into her office being like, here are all the solutions that I have. I've tried to figure it out beforehand so that you can just pick whatever one. This is not an ideal situation, but we can work it out. And I think that you did really awesome going in there. It's really hard advocating for yourself and sticking up for yourself. Especially for me, I'm a super people pleaser. So I'm just, whatever you need to happen, I'll get it done, even if that means that I have to just do extra work. Those get us in situations where there's so much on our plate and we're like, holy moly, how do we even focus on our mental health now when we put ourselves in all these types of situations? But I just want to commend you for just, sticking up for yourself, because that is really hard. And I hope that you got to at least enjoy your first pregnancy a little.
I did. And luckily I chose to take a semester off right after he was born, because one, I didn't want to rush back into classes. I had no idea what being a first-time mom was going to be like. So I didn't want to say, oh, I can do that. I can just make it work, because I
do.
Yeah, we usually do that. Like my counselor at school, he even said, would you be willing to just take an elective during that semester off, just so that you're not as far behind? And ultimately I said no, which is so hard as a people pleaser. It's so hard to say no, but I'm so grateful. Like, postpartum is a beast. I had no way of knowing how hard it was going to be. So that semester off was a godsend, ultimately, to just get my bearings as a mom before jumping back into school the next semester.
Yeah. And I bet saying no to them was absolutely terrifying, because we always have these feelings when we go into graduate school. I've been like seeing this trend, and it happened with me too, but I didn't realize it until after graduate school, that once we get into school, we get that acceptance letter, we pay our deposit, we're in the school, and we feel this need to constantly try to prove why we deserve a seat at the table, right? Oh, I'm just going to email my supervisor at 10 p.m. so that she knows that I'm awake and I'm doing this stuff, or I'm going to send in my project 4 days early to just prove that I'm like doing really well. But I often tell grad students, I'm like, you already proved why you deserve to be here. Now you just have to do the best you can every day, and your best is going to look different every day. And often when we aren't constantly proving ourselves, we're like, okay, we deserve to be here. We start to stick up for ourselves. We start to feel that the people around us are supporting us and not constantly needing that we are proving ourselves there. So I'm really proud of you for that, because saying no to a grad school is just, oh my gosh. And they were probably like, Wait, did you just say no? Because they're probably not used to that. So that's really awesome. And I'm happy you got to spend that time with your baby when he was a newborn, because I bet that going back to grad school was probably extremely hard.
Oh, it was so brutal. Luckily, because I missed out on fall semester after he was born, I didn't jump right into my extern like I would have. That first semester back, all it was clinical hours at the university. And so, yes, I had quite a few clients. I was there at school for probably 8 hours a day anyway, but at least it wasn't a full-time job. I at least knew what I was getting into going back. But it was so hard to leave him every day. I kudos to the people that go to grad school with kids that are older that know what's going on, because at least my son didn't know what was going on. He was just happy when I got home.
Yeah, I had another podcast guest come on, also similar situation where she had a baby during graduate school, and she talked briefly upon the kind of guilt that she felt. Is there any sort of guilt that you felt that like you had to leave him at home and go back to the grad school life?
Yeah, I felt like I couldn't do anything at home because it was like, well, once I'm home, I want to spend time with my baby. I want to spend time with my husband, especially because he was working from home and watching the baby at the same time. And so he's this new parent too. And I was like, oh, I'm leaving you for X amount of hours each day to figure this out by yourself too. This is also new. And I ended up just setting a boundary of, okay, I'm going to do all my lesson plans and all of my writing to supervisors and all of that at school, so that when I come home, I could truly be present.
Yeah, boundaries is a big thing I talk about in grad school too. A lot of the times I get DMs being like, how do you find time for anything? And I'm like, the only way you find time is if you do it yourself. You have to set those boundaries. You have to say, grad school is a part of my life, but it's not my life.
Yeah.
I think that when we step foot into graduate school and they're all just, you can't work, you can't do anything at all for the next 2 years, we internalize that. And that's why we find ourselves going to school at 7 a.m. and not finishing work until 11 p.m. And it's okay. I only ate a cookie and I had some coffee today. And that's how our mental health goes to absolute garbage during grad school. So I always like to advocate, like, set those boundaries. It is hard. No one is saying it is.
Yeah.
You're going to have that feeling where you're like, am I doing something wrong? And the answer is no. A lot of graduate students come out of grad school already burnt out and they already hate their CF. And that's where we get into the motion where I hate speech pathology. I hate what I'm doing. And it's no, you love it. It's just that grad school tried to dim your flame and you're letting it. Let's take a step back and let's really set those boundaries. It's hard. It is really hard.
Absolutely. And even before the baby was born, I realized that I was starting to get burned out with the schedule and trying to keep up with everything, because I definitely had that imposter syndrome too. I was like, I only got into one school. I better show them they made the right choice. But when I realized I was starting to get burnt out, I actually told myself weekends are off limits, which seemed like just preposterous. I would never tell anyone that that's why I wasn't available. If it was a group project, they're like, oh, how does Sunday sound? I just would say, oh, I'm busy, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, sorry, I don't work on Sundays, because that just sounded so pretentious. But setting that boundary for myself was so crucial for being able to reset each week and just get that break that I needed, because grad school is hard.
It is so hard. And there's just so many things happening at once. When you tack on that whole kind of like people pleasing attitude, plus like imposter syndrome is always like in the background. It's hard because you're constantly needing that, or you constantly have that feeling where you need to just always go. And I always tell people, I'm like, there will always be something to worry about. If you start having that mentality, okay, what's next? What else do I have to worry about? There will always be something to worry about, whether it's the test next week or whether you're worrying about, are you going to get your clinical fellowship, or are you going to pass the praxis, but you're only a semester one student? There will always be something to worry about. But if you don't have your mentality when those things come and you have good mental health when those things come, it's going to be an absolute chaotic time in your life. You need those weekends. And honestly, I always tell people that is a great thing for you to set a boundary for. Weekends are off limits. And I bet it seemed impossible until you started doing it.
Oh, totally. Because you realize, oh, I have so much work to do. How am I going to write this paper if I take 2 full days off? But looking back, if anyone else were to say that to me, it's like, it's 2 days. You have 5 other days to work. And so, yeah, I would write out my schedule of everything that was due for the whole month so that I could be like, okay, this is due in 2 weeks, but I have free time on this Monday. Okay, I'm going to do it, whether it's due right now or not, so that I can protect those boundaries.
Yeah, time management is huge in graduate school. And when I tell graduate students, I'm just like, yeah, I'll just take 12 hours off on a Saturday. Take 12 hours for yourself. And they're like, what? How dare you? Don't you know how much I have to do? And I'm like, yes, I do. But I promise if you take those 12 hours and do something for yourself, whether that be going to the spa or literally sitting on your couch doing absolutely nothing, you will realize how more energized you are to actually get that task done. And also when we're constantly working ourselves, we're not working 100% all the time. No matter what we're convincing our brain of, we are not giving 100% of the time. So we are more likely to give that 100% when we have time to just settle down and breathe.
Yeah, for sure. That motivation has time to build back up.
Exactly.
Whereas if you're just going, you're running on fumes. And just like you said, it won't be your 100%.
Exactly. So tell us a little bit about how graduation went and how your application process for your clinical fellowship went.
Sure. So because of my extension of my program by 2 semesters, I finished in December of this past year of 2022, which meant that I'll be walking in May. So I still didn't get to walk or have a graduation ceremony or anything, but I got grouped in with a different cohort and finished with them, did the comprehensive exams practice, all that back in December. And like the crazy person I am, we moved back to Utah the day after I finished my externship. But during that last semester of externship is when I started applying to jobs. I knew through my clinical experiences, especially ending in my adult externship placement, that I wanted to work with kids.
You ended on something that you did not want.
Yeah, I ended, and luckily, because my externship, my last semester was private practice, it was a mix. And so seeing that side to side helped me see, oh, I get really excited about planning for my kid clients, and I tolerate planning for my adult clients. So I started just applying for any job on those job listing sites that had to do with kids. I knew I didn't necessarily want to work in a hospital, but I was even applying to those just because I wanted to make sure I got a job by the time we got out here to Utah. And I ended up landing a job with a private practice that only works with kids.
Awesome.
Yeah. I was like, oh, this is a dream. I don't have to do IEPs, but I still get to work with kids.
Yeah, that is amazing. And are the hours a little more flexible than a school would be?
Yeah. So I can set my availability. I'm working up towards full time right now with my client, but the owners are awesome. So if you're like, oh, I only want to work a half day on Mondays, don't set that block in your schedule so that you can make that work.
That's awesome. So do you find there's a difference like being a mom in grad school and being a mom for like in your clinical fellowship?
Yeah. And once you're actually working, you can leave it at work.
Yeah.
You can go home and not feel this pending doom of all these assignments that are due. As in grad school, there's always something to be done,
Yeah.
which I could take that mentality with work, but it's so much easier not to, because in my little bit of free time at work, I write up my evaluations or write my notes. But ultimately, there's just so much less to do as a working SLP. And that is just so freeing to just be able to come home and be like, oh, I am now just a mom now that I'm home.
No, that is awesome. And did you feel like going from your like being a student to being a clinical fellow, did you feel like the transition of, okay, I'm a student, okay, now I'm an actual SLP. I feel like I have to know everything. I feel like I have to be amazing at everything.
It was an interesting transition for me. With less supervision, I almost felt more confident in my abilities
Yeah.
because I wasn't constantly being watched over. It was like, okay, if I make a little mistake, no one's there taking notes to talk to me about it afterwards. I can just take mental note and do better next time I see them. And so becoming a clinical fellow was so freeing, where I'm like, okay, I've gotten some complex cases, but I can just look it up. I can just figure it out as I go. I don't feel like I'm performing for anyone anymore.
I love
I'm just actually working
Yeah.
to help my clients.
Do you treat your son like a client?
Totally. It almost takes me an hour after I get home to not talk in 2-word phrases to him. It's like, more food? You want more? And so luckily his milestones are right on track, so I don't have that worry.
Check. 2-word utterances, check.
And so, yeah, it does take a little bit of getting home to turn off the SLP voice with him.
Look, you made it. You did something that was really hard. You took the challenges and you handled them like an absolute boss. It may not have felt like it in the moment, but now you can talk about you did probably one of the hardest things in graduate school, and that's rough. And I'm proud of you for doing that.
Yeah, in the moment, it definitely felt like I was a masochist. I was like, why am I choosing all this? But honestly, I wouldn't have changed a thing. Having my son in grad school made it so much easier to relate to parents with clients. Like my kid placement was working with preschool kids. And so when parents were worried about A, B, or C, I could be like, oh, my son likes that show too. Or yeah, it was really hard to be a parent. And so I felt like I built trust so much easier with the parents and the families.
That's awesome. You relate to them on a whole different level that some people can't even relate to them. So that's awesome. So do you have any advice for people who are going through a similar situation where they either are becoming a new parent, they are a parent, or just advocating for yourself in graduate school when it's really scary?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just taking time to listen to what your needs are. That's going to be different for everybody. Some people can power through, but that's not the ideal. Right. So don't be shooting for that. Don't say, if they can do it, I can do it. Because you have no idea what type of struggles are going on behind the scenes. So if you think, okay, I need an extension on this deadline, it's okay to ask. More often than not, teachers are okay with that. Yeah. There were times where I asked my professors, hey, my husband has a meeting at this time at the same time as our class. Can I just bring my son to class this one day? And usually, more often than not, they're like, oh, sure, do what you need to do. Yeah. Because the faculty are people too. When you advocate for themselves, it helps them see you as people. Yeah. And not just a student. And so don't be afraid to be that person that needs those things.
Yeah. I always say too, like, we are professional communicators and we oftentimes forget to communicate our own needs. We're often, you just know, like, our clients' needs are number one, our family's needs are number one. And so, what about you? What do you need? So communicate those needs. Like Natalie was saying, communicate what you need in graduate school. Graduate school will tell everyone, yeah, you only have to focus on us. You have to be perfect. You have to do the best all the time around. But once you start talking to those professors and saying, hey, I need this, or hey, something happened in my life, these are the supports that I need, you'd be surprised to see who actually will step up and be like, okay, what do you need? What can I help with? Because we're oftentimes dealing with speech pathologists who have a huge heart. Professors aren't always like these scary monsters that are out to get us. Once we communicate what we need, they're going to be there for us. Also, going off of that too, I find that we don't often, I'm saying often so many times, we don't communicate our needs because we have this sort of comparison problem with comparing ourselves to other people in our cohort. So they also have a kid. So if they can do it, like you said, I can do it. But no, people, who knows what they're asking for behind closed doors. They may be asking for something. And I always tell students that people will only tell you what they want, what they want you to know about them. So if I say, oh, I got 100 on my research studies exam, but I'm hiding the fact that I completely bombed my early intervention exam, you may say, oh, Sam is so good at everything, she always gets 100. But no, I'm just not telling you my failures. So people only tell you what they want. You don't need to compare. You deserve to be there. You are going to do really well, and you have to just communicate what you need along the journey.
Absolutely. And I wasn't oddly enough, I wasn't the only one in my original cohort that got pregnant and had a baby during grad school. And the other, my cohort member, she ended up just powering through, where she had the baby and then 3 weeks later started her externship.
Wow.
And in my head, I was like, if she can do it, I bet all the faculty are thinking, why aren't you doing it? And all these thoughts starts flowing in. And I had to just, again, remind myself, she's getting the support she needs. I'm there for her if she needs that shoulder to lean on. But I ultimately have to do what's best for me, which was taking that semester off and then easing back into it.
Exactly. At that point, it was just like your journey is what mattered right then. Good for her for powering through. You supported her in that, but you knew what you needed at the moment and you advocated for it. And I bet you don't regret that at all.
Oh, no, definitely not. I got to spend basically my son's first 6 months exclusively with him, which is precious time.
While also being in graduate school, while also graduating a couple months later, you did it all, girl.
Yeah, it was a lot, but ultimately I'm so grateful because I love my job right now, and I couldn't have done that if I would have given in any way along the way, or if I had gotten burnt out and wasn't available to take this position on when it was available.
And who knows, had you not taken those 6 months off, if this would have been an open availability at the time where you were looking.
Yeah.
Everything works out. It all.
Yeah.
Natalie, thank you so much for coming on. If you have any last minute kind of advice, or if you want to tell people where they can find you and talk to you, if you have people who are in the kind of a similar situation.
Sure. Yeah, like I said, the number one thing is just listen to your needs and advocate for that. Find your voice.
Yes.
We spend so much time helping other people find their voice, but find your voice
I love that.
and don't be scared to advocate for yourself. People are willing to listen more often than not.
Love that.
Yeah. And so if anyone wants to talk about my experience, they can find me on Instagram. My DMs are open. I'm not an influencer by any means, but if you want to talk experience, my Instagram is Nat Iverson.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Natalie. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next time.